Yeah, reframing influencer marketing. What I really want to take you through today are some different ideas. Purusha, obviously, fantastic presentation, wonderful inspiration ideas about inspiration. Very high level strategic thinking, and a very good session that we saw moments ago. If you're watching this live, I want to drill down a little closer to the bone right now and talk a little bit more about something a bit more tactical, but in a strategic sense. So we're going to talk about influencer marketing, which is certainly something that has been a buzzword and a category that a lot of us are trying to explore more here in our marketing in this day and age. So the first thing I really want to kind of talk to you about is what your perception is of influencer marketing, because the perception out there in the marketplace, I think, is a bit mixed and jumbled, and there's good reason for that. There's a here in the United States, and I believe also in parts of Europe, there is a documentary on HBO, which is obviously one of the movie or cable networks. It's called Fake Famous, and what Fake Famous is an experiment by Nick Bilton, who used to be the a technology writer for the New York Times and is a contributor to Vanity Fair magazine. And what Nick did is he had an interest in influencers and finding out what online influencers say and do and how they build their networks. Are they real? Are they worth investing in? And so his experiment, which happened a couple of years ago, was to take three individuals, the three people you see here on the screen, who didn't have more than 1,000, 1,200 followers on Instagram, and his experiment was to essentially buy fake followers generated by the bots that you can use to generate fake followers on your social networks. To give these three people the appearance that they have lots of followers on Instagram, to see how quickly he could create a fake famous person, a fake influencer who doesn't have influence, who just has an audience of bot followers, to see how quickly he could get brands to offer them free products, to offer them money, to offer them trips, things of that nature. And using these three people and putting his credit card on the line and buying them followers and buying them engagement through these nefarious ways that you can do that on the internet, he was able to, the two gentlemen on either side of the young lady in the middle there, they both very early on said, you know what, I'm not really comfortable with this. This isn't authentic. This isn't real. I don't like the experiment. So they sort of backed out. But Dominique Druckmann, the young lady in the middle, decided, hey, I'm all in. I don't care. Let's do it. And so, over the course of this documentary, it explores Nick Bilton buying her 150 to 200,000 followers on Instagram. And instantly, almost instantly, as she hit the 30, 40,000 mark, brands started reaching out to her and offering free product, offering to take her on trips, to see and experience their product and service. And so he created a fake famous influencer. She really had no substance to her audience. And in the end, Nick Bilton at the end of this documentary, he basically says influencers are a farce. They're not effective. They're all fake. They all create their audience this way. In fact, I had Nick on my podcast to talk about the show, and he says that he thinks the best practices of the worst offenders are the majority of people that are quote unquote influencers. Well, I begged to differ, and we had a nice discussion about it. I also started looking at the analysis tools to figure out, are what percentage of an influencer's audience is bot or fake bot traffic, things of that nature. The truth and the reality is, when you come down to it, the statistics will show you that the vast majority, 85% of influencers out there, have very little in terms of fake traffic, very little in terms of bot followers. Now, we all have bot followers. I've never tried to game the system. I've never tried to buy followers on any given social network. And according to these tools, about 5% of my audience on Twitter is bots or fake followers. I've never paid for that. I've never asked for that, but it's only 5%. You have to remember, these bots, in order to be seen as legitimate in the algorithms, have to follow other people too, right? So we're all going to have a certain degree of fake followers. Nick Bilton thinks, that the majority of influencers build their followings this way. I know from looking at hundreds and hundreds of influencers in analysis for the brands that I work with, that the average that I see is typically between 75 and 95% of followers, a given influencer's followers, are real, actual accounts, actual people. If you get anything below about 70, 75% of real followers, then you have a concern. And that's one way that you can filter and choose influencers that you want to use more wisely. Why do I bring this up? Why do we start out talking about this, sort of light of negativity on influencers? Well, we have to kind of understand what influencers are. And for those of you who are maybe new to influencer marketing, you're running a business, you're trying to figure out whether or not this is an avenue to use for your brand, or if you're at an agency and you're trying to figure out influencer marketing to recommend it strategically to your clients. What you're hearing from the mainstream media, people like Nick Bilton, people like the documentary on Fake Famous, and some of the news stories that you see about influencers are typically negative. They're typically, this influencer faked their trip to Bali and just took pictures of themselves in their friend's backyard, or this influencer photoshopped clouds into their Instagram images to fake a perfect setting, and they're living their quote unquote best life while actually manufacturing that in nefarious ways. And so, if that's all you're hearing about influencer marketing, then you obviously think influencers are negative or bad or a risky investment. So, what I want to do is help you rethink about influencers. First of all, what do you think of when you think of influencers? Well, most people think that you are talking about Instagrammers and YouTubers. And I guess now you would probably also say TikTokers, or depending upon what country you're in, there might be an affinity for Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or some other network where that's where your quote unquote influencers are. But if you look at influencers through this filter, you're looking at it through a tunnel. You're looking at a very small portion of the total opportunity out there of people who have influence, because to a degree, we all have some degree of influence. So we need to rethink how we position influencer marketing. We need to reframe it. And instead of thinking about it as influencer marketing, we need to think of it in terms of influence marketing. Now, why is that? Because an influencer is anyone who can motivate an audience to take action. That could be an Instagrammer or a YouTuber or a TikToker, or it could be a public speaker. It could be a minister, priest, shaman, or guru. It could be that if you're a local business and your target audience is parents, a vocal parent, maybe the president of your local parent teacher association is the best influencer for your business. And it doesn't matter how many followers they have on social networks. I do a lot of work in this alcohol, wine, and spirits industry, and our biggest audience of influencers are bartenders, because they are the person who can recommend a drink, a brand of beverage, to a patron who doesn't know what to choose. So they're very influential. And it doesn't matter, again, how many followers they have on social networks, because they are interacting directly face to face with our end consumer. Political leaders, lobbyists, political activists, all of these different categories of people can be termed as influencers. And so we need to think about influencers differently. We also need to reframe how we position what we're trying to do strategically. An influencer is a noun, it's the subject. You don't influence or market. You can use influencers to market. But what we're trying to do is not influencer. What we're trying to do is influence. We're trying to take an action. We're trying to strategically practice a verb. We are trying to influence an audience to take action. So if we just take away that R and not focus on the subject, make it influence marketing and focus on the action, now all of a sudden the blinders come off and we see this world and the opportunity for our business or brand very, very differently. Let me take you through a quick case study so that you can sort of see how that. So let me take you through this quick case study so that you can sort of see what this looks like in real life. In Lexington, Kentucky, where Cornett is located, the agency where I work, one of our clients is the University of Kentucky, which is a college university in Lexington. It's their healthcare, their hospital system. So it's not only the educational arm of the University of Kentucky that teaches doctors and nurses and other practitioners in the medical sciences, but it is the indigent trauma center. It is the orthopedic specialty center in the state of Kentucky. It's also they have great stroke care, cancer care, heart care, etc. Lots of wonderful healthcare professionals work there, and it is a large healthcare brand in this region. So a couple of years ago, they came to Cornett with a typical advertising campaign, but the creative concept was that we were going to launch this campaign with a 2-minute movie, a little inspirational, uplifting profile of the five primary care center practice centers within the University of Kentucky healthcare system. And it was, if cinematographic is a word, it was very cinematographic. It was looked like a movie. It felt like a movie. There were some, emotional highs and lows in the film, and so it was a really interesting watch. It was only 2 minutes long, but let's be real. Who is going to sit down and watch a 2-minute movie about a hospital? Not very many people. So we had a challenge that was put in front of us. And that challenge was let's drive social engagement for the brand around this motion picture to see if we can get more people to see it to help kick off this larger campaign idea. We wanted to maximize the reach of this video within the target audience, which in University of Kentucky Healthcare's case, they target basically what they call the CMO of the household, the chief marketing officer of the household, which is typically the mother, the woman of the household who makes the healthcare decisions for her children. She probably influences or recommends the healthcare decisions for her spouse. She probably is making healthcare decisions for her aging parents as well. So that's our primary target audience. So that's kind of the demographic framework within which we're working here. We wanted to also provide a platform for anybody who engaged with this movie to tell their story. So we wanted to incite some user generated content. And in order to do that, we came up with an idea to hack the Facebook algorithm. Now, that's not anything nefarious or illegal, but the Facebook algorithm is very complicated. And so over the course of several years of doing this in several different iterations, we figured out a couple of insights about the Facebook algorithm. In order to get your content to be seen organically by more people, there's a few triggers that you need to pull. One is the content recent? So the more recent a piece of content is, the more relevant it is to impress in someone's news feed, according to what we know about the Facebook algorithm. And that makes perfect sense. Today's news is a lot more relevant than yesterday's news. So recency counts for something. What that does in translating into how you use it for your content is if you can get people to view and interact with your content within a couple of hours of it posting, it has a better chance of rising organically in what Facebook offers up to relevant consumers. And that word relevant comes into play because the content, in addition to being recent, if it's also relevant to a given person who's logged into Facebook, then it has a higher chance of being seen. And by relevance, it can be everything from this person interacts with that brand frequently, this person interacts with that category frequently, this person is geographically situated close to this brand. We're talking about a regional healthcare center here. So geography has something to play in here. And then resonance is the last piece that we know is relevant. And what that means is if a piece of content goes up and it resonates with the audience, therefore, lots of people stop and watch the video, lots of people like, lots of people comment, lots of people interact. If you can drive that resonance within a few hours of it posting to hit the recency trigger, and you're doing that within a very relevant audience geographically or topically, then you have the optimal chance of getting your content elevated organically in the Facebook algorithm. So, what we did with this 2-minute motion picture, we scheduled it to launch, had a premiere of this video on Facebook at 11 a.m. I think it was on a Tuesday. And we engaged influencers in the geographic area of central Kentucky. Now, for those of you who don't know, basketball, the sport of basketball, is very big in the United States. It's also very big in Kentucky. And John Calipari, the gentleman in the middle there, is the head basketball coach at the University of Kentucky. So he is probably the most famous and most influential person in the state of Kentucky at any given moment, just because so many people in this state love the University of Kentucky Wildcat basketball team. So, fortunately, he also works for the University of Kentucky. So, we were able to work that connection and get him to do what we were going to ask our influencers to do. But we also looked at people like the Kentucky Taste Buds, who are two young ladies who do local restaurant and attraction reviews on their blog, on their podcast, and they also host a morning radio show on terrestrial radio on Saturday mornings. So they're very popular in the area. We also have Renetta Davis and Priyanka Patel in here who are fashion influencers and lifestyle influencers that are happen to be based in Lexington, Kentucky. Deanne Stevens is a local television personality. Meredith Lane Ferguson is a very popular and successful real estate agent and content creator in the area. The Driscoll Quints is a group of quintuplets who were actually born at the Children's Hospital at the University of Kentucky. So we found all of these people who had nice online followings, and we asked them to do three things. We want you to come to the post within a couple of hours of it launching. We want you to like the post and comment on it, tell your UK healthcare story. And then we want you to share the post on your feeds so that you can inspire your audience to do the same thing. Ask them to come see the movie, like it, and tell their UK healthcare story. So those were our calls to action. We had 43 that agreed to participate. Combined, they had a potential reach of 1.2 million followers. And we asked them to share this on several different networks, even though Facebook was our primary place of business. But that's influencer marketing. We needed to practice influence marketing. So we also reached out to people with influence, influential people in the area. And that included the mayor, Linda Gorton, the mayor of Lexington. It also included PG Peoples, who's the CEO of the Urban League, a social organization in town, a local state representative, the chief executive officer of the local Ronald McDonald House charity. Marlon Hurst is the music director of the Presbyterian Church in Lexington, which is a very large church, but he's also very active in the arts community. So he's going to see a lot of people and talk to a lot of people. And when they see him doing something on Facebook, then they might say, oh, I really trust him and his tastes. I'm going to go check that out too. And then Gretchen Kinchin is a dentist in town. So imagine how many moms she comes into contact with in her daily practice. So we didn't limit it to online influencers. We also looked at offline influencers. 75 of those agreed to participate. They didn't really have very much online following at all, if any, but they have a massive impact on the community. So what that resulted in was that within 6 hours, we had 40,000 views of the video. Remember, this is a 2-minute commercial basically for a hospital. We had 40,000 views within 6 hours, 150,000 within a day, and 800,000 within 4 weeks. Keep in mind, Lexington, Kentucky is a city of about 320,000 people. So our view count was 3x the local population by the end of the month. That's a pretty good return, I think. We had a very small budget. They didn't have a lot of Facebook fans, but we were able to just explode this content because we were thinking about influence marketing, not influencer marketing. Why does that work? Why does influence marketing have that kind of an impact when you're not limiting yourself to online influencers? Well, if you look at the research, and this comes from Chatter Matters, which is the research behind Jay Baer and Daniel Lemon's best-selling book, Talk Triggers, which is a great word-of-mouth marketing book. They asked people in their research, who do you trust for recommendations and referrals when you're making a significant purchase? So there's lots of different categories of purchases, and our who we trust changes depending upon how much money we're going to spend. But outside of personal experience, which is the first one, and a brand you're familiar with, which is the second one, the next three are recommendations from family and friend, online reviews, and expert reviews. This is where online influencers come into play with expert reviews. This is also where the offline folks come into play, family and friend recommendations. We all have influence on other people, and we all receive influence from other people, regardless of how many people they have following them on Instagram or TikTok or any other platform. So, how do you bake this in to build your influence strategy for your business or your brand? Let's walk through some tactical steps here And then I want to give you some ideas on how you can use influence marketing today for your business. First of all, everything strategically has to start with your goals. Your influence marketing goals really should ladder up to your overall marketing goals, which should ladder up to your overall business goals. That way, you are a fine oiled machine. You are working in one direction. All the pistons are firing on the same thing at the same time. If your overall business goal is to grow your market share, then obviously your marketing goals is going to be to create better awareness and better opportunities for people to convert, etc. That should also be the overall strategic goal of your influence marketing program. That goal, defining that early on, is not only going to inform every decision you make along the way, which influencers to choose, how much to invest, what channels to focus on, but it's also going to help you do what circles back at the very end, which we'll touch on in a minute, which is measuring your success and understanding the return from your investment. Once you decide your goals, then you have to really look at your audiences, your prospective customers, the people you're trying to reach. They need to overlap with an influential person's audience. If those two audiences don't overlap, then using that influencer, you're talking to the wrong people, right? Their audience needs to overlap with you. And this can be everything from really getting down into the nitty gritty and understanding the demographics, but it could also be, let's make sure that their audience, the influencer that we're choosing, let's make sure that their content aligns with our brand and our content. And I'll give you a very superficial, not a strategic thing, but a kind of a directional gut feel. When I'm looking at a given influencer online, I like to do two things. I like to, first of all, open up the brand's Instagram account and look at just the static pictures, just the profile page, the grid, if you will. And I can get a pretty good sense from the type of photography, the type of images, the color schemes, the fonts, if there are any used. I can get a feel for what the brand feels like, looks like. I can see light and fun, or I can see dark and concentrated, focused. I can see lots of different things that come out of just the aesthetic feel of the brand's Instagram account. Now I'm going to open up the given influencer's account. Are there similarities? The more similarities, again, very superficial judgment here. So you need to get a lot deeper than this. But at first glance, if I say, yeah, those two things match up, now I know this is an influencer I want to investigate a little further. If they don't match up at all, if they don't align at all, if the brand is very corporate, conservative, buttoned up, people are dressed well, smiling, stock photography type photos, and this person over here's got on a backwards ball cap and their tattoos are showing and they've got a pierced nose, I know that's probably not a great aesthetic alignment. Doesn't mean that that influencer is not important to that brand. It doesn't mean there couldn't be something that happens. But at first glance, I'm not going to put them high on the priority list. I'll come back to them later if I still think that they're relevant. So defining your audiences and understanding the influencers that you reach need to be talking to the audience that you're ultimately supposed to reach. And there's tools out there that can help you figure out which ones do and which ones don't. This is when you start to delineate those influential people. You're trying to find those people who influence the eyes of your influence through the eyes of your prospective customers. It goes back to just what we were talking about if you figure out defining your audiences, you have to really understand that the people you're ultimately trying to reach are the crux. They're the linchpin in this decision. So making sure that the influential people that you are talking to, that you're trying to partner with, online or offline, are the types of people that your ultimate consumer is going to believe and trust for their recommendation, their education, their information about your product or service. Then, before you even reach out to them, you have to develop assets. And the reason that I say you have to develop assets for them is, yes, you can reach out to an influencer and say, we'd like to partner with you. You're going to create all the content, but they're going to need something. They're going to need information about your brand. They might need, if they're doing videos, they might need some B-roll footage, or they might need photography. They're definitely going to need talking points and messaging points. Imagine if you were to reach out to an influencer who's hard to get a hold of, and you finally get them on the hook and you say, I'd like to do a collaboration with you. And this is probably talking more about online influencers than offline influencers. But imagine you were to get that conversation and they say, okay, I'd be glad to do that. I need this video asset. I need your headshot of your CEO. I need some quotes. I need product specifications. I need your talking points. If you don't have all of that at the ready, then you might lose the engagement because the influencer is going to be like, oh, you're not prepared. And you're going to have to say, oh, well, I want to do that engagement, but I'll have to get back to you because I don't have all that ready for you yet. So that's a disconnect in what you're trying to do. Make sure you have those assets ready to go to that influential person and say, here's what I want you to do. Here's when I want you to do it, what I want you to say, how I want you to say it. And here are assets that will allow you to do that in a successful way with the type of content that you create. Now you're ready to deliver messages. You're ready to reach out to the influential people that you're targeting, to engage them and say, hey, I'd like to collaborate with you to do this. What does that look like? Do you charge, a fee? Can I just trade you product for that activity? What value can I provide to you to make this worth your while? And do keep in mind that there are a lot of online influencers who do this for a living. You are not only asking them for their time, which is worth money, you're asking them for creative content, which is worth money. And you're also asking them for access to their audience, which is worth money. So think about the value that they are giving you so that you can then come up with something hopefully equitable in return. A lot of people say, do I have to pay influencers? The answer is not always. It depends. You might find you're reaching out to micro influencers who have a couple of thousand followers, and they would be more than happy to post a review or talk about your product just for the free product, depending upon how valuable your product is. But if you're talking to someone who does this for a living, they've cultivated an audience, they've cultivated influence intentionally, they're probably going to need some type of remuneration to make it worth their time because they've got other people asking for their time as well. So keep that in mind. Now, with the offline influencers, when you're working with community relations and whatnot, you're often not going to have to be able to not have to pay them anything. You might need to give them free product so they know what they're talking about. But if you do that in creative ways and just say, hey, we'd like to give you this. And maybe you say, I'm going to give you free product. And if you post about it online, fine. Or if you talk to your friends and family about it, that's fine, but you don't have to. Sometimes it's worth the return to just be nice and give that product away to kind of build that equity in relationship with that particular consumer who you consider an influencer. And then you're obviously going to help them craft the messages that they deliver to their audiences. The influence happens, the content happens, the online content goes out and whatnot. Now, what do you need to do? Well, you need to determine successes. And this goes back to the very first thing we talked about in this little step by step process of defining your goals. Again, if you define your goal very clearly up front, then you know exactly what you're going to measure at the end. Did you accomplish that goal? If you define your goal really well up front, you're going to set little data traps along the way to judge whether or not you're making progress toward that goal. So that if you get, a month into a 6-month campaign, you can say, well, this influencer is not working out, but this influencer is, going gangbusters, driving attention around what we're doing. Let's go ahead and, sunset the contract with this one or the agreement with this first one and put more energy into this one or find a replacement for that one that might be better. So you're going to set those data traps along the way so that you can optimize toward success. That way, when you get to the end, you don't look back and say, well, we didn't do very well. You can say, well, we started out slow, but we course corrected and we made things work better so that we ultimately got to where we needed to go and made progress toward our overall goal, or we accomplished that overall goal along the way. Real quick case study of what this looks like. This is a B2B case study from the United Kingdom. UBS is a financial services company. And I love this case study because they wanted to drive leads for their financial services. So life insurance, annuities, things like that. Their strategy was to identify influencers in a very niche segment and pitch their executives for interviews. So this is kind of a PR play, but they wanted to find influencers who talked about financial planning, who talked about taxes, accounting, things like that, because they wanted to reach those audiences of people who were trying to learn more information about it. Well, the result of this influencer marketing execution was they increased lead generation. The UBS is a big company, so they have a lot of leads because they spend a lot of money on marketing. But they increased lead generation from this category by 4 times. So 400 times, 400% return on their investment in terms of leads. It's not a financial metric necessarily, but 4x their leads. And how did they do it? They did it with one influencer. They identified Martin Bamford, who has a podcast about financial planning in the United Kingdom. And he only has about 12,000 online followers, or only had about that many at the time. His podcast got 1,000 downloads a week, which is a pretty, good number for a small podcast. But they had an executive come on his show and talk about financial planning, and they drove a ton of leads from it. It was one influencer who helped them multiply their leads by 4 times. So this doesn't have to be big investment. I don't think there was money that exchanged hands here. I think they just said, we'd like to present this executive as a guest for your podcast. And so UBS didn't even have to pay for it, I don't believe. And it was one influencer that reached the right audience. Some ideas for today as we wrap up here, and I hope you can activate around some of these today, tomorrow, or this week so that you can start to see some return on your influence marketing efforts very, very soon. Live streaming has become the thing on most of these social networks. You can use an influencer who's good at live streaming to live stream on your channels to talk about an event or something you've got going on. They can live stream on their channels and interview you with the right partnership. You can tap into their audience that way. You can also tap into their expertise. If they bring something to the table that your audience might appreciate on your channels, that's a fantastic way to start that relationship with the influencer. Maybe then you turn it around and say, okay, we brought you to our audience. We want you to bring us to yours. You can bring your expertise to them. So live streaming is one way to do it. Use the influencers in your content. Get guest posts or quotes from them. Ask them to appear or host a webinar for you. If you're in the B2B space, do a report about your industry or survey your customers, and then get the influencer to offer quotes and commentary on that. Because what happens when you publish that report with all their quotes in it? Well, they turn around and share it. Now, all of a sudden, your brand is getting in front of their audience because they're proud of the quote that they've got in that particular publication. You can also engage them to create content for your channels. In fact, most influencer contracts these days are focused on, hey, we want you to create content over there for your audience, but we also want to use that content on our channels too. So we'd like permission to be able to do that once you create that video or that TikTok video or that Instagram post, etc. And then, of course, you can use their content in your social content as well, promoting what you're doing with them. You can actually share their content, particularly the ones that are really relevant to your brand. You can also uh, expand your platforms. So TikTok is obviously a very popular topic for businesses and brands these days. How do we get into it? How do we get involved? How do we engage consumers there? Well, the best person to answer that question is someone who already knows how. And those are going to be influential people on TikTok. So partner with them to maybe, take your brand to their audience, but maybe partner with them to say, hey, we want to do something good on TikTok. Can you coach us and show us and teach us how to do this well? How would you take this brand to TikTok? They already know how to do it. So maybe you use their expertise to help your brand make a splash there. You can also certainly leverage their audience, but you can use them to help learn the platform. You can engage their audience through them, of course, if you don't want to go to TikTok and have your own account and all that good stuff. But you can use them to help build your presence there, which is a really smart way to jump into a network and an audience and an ecosystem that you may not be real comfortable with or even familiar with. And then everything you do, amplify it with paid spend. I love social media. I love influencer marketing. I love blogs. I love social content. But I'm in the advertising business, and I know from years of experience that the tried and true way to get your message across to consumers is through reach and frequency. So have that influencer put that content out there or use that influencer's content on your channels, but then amplify that with paid spend so that you're getting it in front of the audience over and over again, hitting that frequency lever so that your brand becomes more top of mind. They become more aware of what you're trying to do. You have a much better chance of getting leads and conversions and revenue that way. So promote your posts using the influencer, pay the influencer to promote their posts so that their posts reach the audience you're trying to reach in a more amplified way. And target really more granularly the audience you wish to reach. We don't have to advertise to everybody now. These tools are social tools, they have information and data about their consumers. So you can literally go into, let's say, Facebook or Instagram and say, I want to reach men age 45 to 50 in Louisville, Kentucky, who love Van Halen and bourbon and drive a Hyundai Santa Fe. And the three guys here in Louisville who do that, including me, will come up and we'll see your advertisement. You can get really granular that way with social advertising these days. So, really quick summary here. Influencer marketing, if you look at it that way, is very prohibitive. Influence marketing is a powerful way to reframe how we think about it. Online, offline, everyone can have influence. So, think about everyone as a potential channel for your strategies. Build your strategy to influence people to buy, try product, think differently about your product or issue. Whatever your overall goal is, build your strategy to do that, and then collaborate with influential people online and offline on your channels, on their channels, and then you can use them to test new content and new networks. Quick things to do today: make a list of those people who would influence your prospects online and offline. So you've got a core list to start with. Brainstorm ideas of value for them to partner with you. And this is both intrinsic and extrinsic. It's not just how much do I have to pay you, it's would my product be valuable to you? Would access to my product development team be value to you? I have a lot of influencer marketing software companies who try to pitch me to do influencer things with them. I don't ask them for money. I ask them, hey, I want to interview your CEO on my podcast. I want access to your product development team so I know what's coming down the line, because it helps build my thought leadership in my industry. Think about that in that context for your vertical as well. And you can always start small. Reach out to one person on your list and start that conversation. How can we collaborate with you so that you can tell your audience about us, our products, and our services, and what would motivate you to do that with us? That's a great way to start. So that brings us to this portion of it. If there are any questions, I'd love to entertain them, but I'd love to invite Aaron back to the table here so that we can close this out. And I appreciate everyone dialing in today and listening to me talk about influencer marketing.